Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of About Abroad, where it's my job to introduce you to people who have built amazing lives for themselves in various foreign corners of the globe. We're talking with expats and thought leaders about moving abroad, remote work, visas, and all the fun and practical knowledge that you need to know to follow in their footsteps. If you've ever dreamed of making a life for yourself overseas, maybe working remotely or embracing long-term travel, retiring or studying abroad, or even just taking a peek inside life beyond your borders, you've landed in the right place. My guest today is Steven Ebbers. He is from the Netherlands, but currently living in London, and we spend a lot of time talking about not just life in London and what makes him love it there, but also his work at Uprise Academy, where he's the head of product and is charged with designing amazing experiences for people who are wanting to make big changes in their life while embracing entrepreneurship, remote work, travel. It's this very cool intersection of all these things that they're doing and what we're talking about here on About Abroad. So Steven's a really interesting guy, super intelligent, has been all over the world as a professional athlete through the business world, loves startups, loves the vibe in London. So we just had so much to talk about, and this one could have gone on for hours, I think, had we not decided to cap ourselves after an hour or so. I hope you will enjoy this conversation. It's packed full of useful information if you're trying to make a big life decision, make changes, embrace location independence or entrepreneurship, or make a move to London. He talks about all of the above in a very inspiring way. So I hope you'll enjoy it. Please help me in welcoming Steven to About Abroad. Hey, Steven, welcome to About Abroad. How you doing?
Hey, man. Yes, I'm perfect. Thank you. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks. I'm really, really excited to have you on the show today. Your story is quite different from a lot of the people that I've talked to so far. And there's like a million different directions I wanted to go in. And I just thought I would start really quickly with a line from your LinkedIn profile and let you expand upon this, if that's all right.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, go for it.
So you say in your about section, after many other really interesting points, in my work, I draw on my experiences and background in psychology, hard-fought titles and lost games as a professional athlete, and long train rides in India and the startup hustle. That just sounds like a episode in and of itself. Like I don't know where you want to go with that, but let's start there. What does that line mean to you?
I guess it means a lot. I think when people post an about page, people want to hear about you. And I guess like this for me summarizes a little bit what I've been about, I guess. In a nutshell, it's my psychology, it's sports, it's travel, and it's my current life, which is really around startups. And I think when trying to avoid small talk, things like these are actually very interesting to give people. I think you start a conversation by having things in there that are about you, because in the end, that's what people want to hear when they start a conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, it's things like that and the few interactions that we've had in the past that made me want to reach out to you to see if you'd be interested in coming on About Abroad. And a big reason of that is, like, obviously we'll get into this, but like, you've traveled a lot. You've lived in a half a dozen different countries. You've explored a lot of different avenues to make that happen. You know, it seems that this idea that you can be anywhere that you want and you can conquer any mountain that you want to conquer is really built into your DNA. It would it be fair to say so?
Yeah, I think it took me a while to get there. I think, yeah, one of my about me page is actually helping people to question their reality. And I guess that's what that bit is all about. Like, you need to ideally get to a point, or at least that helped me a lot, to get to a point where you actually question your reality and what do I want it to be like, and realize that to a certain extent you can poke that a little bit. I completely stole that from Steve Jobs, by the way, but he has this brilliant quote where he's talking about, poking the bubble that you're living and going beyond it. Yes, that's what it's about for me, like questioning your reality and then see, hey, where is there actually room to completely go in a different direction? And I think if you consistently do that, you'll become interesting, let's put it that way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, you've done that in a way where you're currently speaking to us from London, but you're originally from Amsterdam, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I've been in London for about 6.5 years now. It's a fascinating place to be.
Yeah. Was it a goal of yours to get to the UK or London, or how did that come to be? Amsterdam's a phenomenal place that I wonder, it's always what I find interesting with this question, to give it a little bit of background, is like, some people escape one place to go to another, while at the same time there's somebody else crossing like ships in the night, going from the place where that first person's arriving to and going to the other place. So everybody's got their reason for going. What was your reason for getting to the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. And I fully agree with that. It's always fascinating why people move. I think in my case, I was ready for something new. I think when people move places, or at least if I speak for myself, there's two options. One, you're running away from something, or you're moving towards something. And I would I would lie if I would say that I was just running towards something. I've been living in Amsterdam for about 25 years by then, and it's an amazing place, but it's also small. And I feel like I moved to London not with the idea of settling here, but that's what happened, because this place, it speaks to me. There's a certain energy and a certain drive that I find fascinating. I think in Holland, what I've experienced is that it very much, we have this almost like this quote, which is, just be normal, that's weird enough. Whereas in the UK, it's almost the opposite, right? I feel like you have to try to make the best of it, and otherwise you'll disappear. At the same time, it can be destructive, that vibe, but it really spoke to me coming from a Dutch background. So yeah, I moved here and I basically never left. But in the meantime, I've been to, yeah, quite a lot of other places. So it's not like I've just been here for 6.5 years, but it's done well for me. So I'm very happy being here.
Yeah, see, it seems like that quote that you just referenced, like about Holland, may not jive real well with your mindset on like conquering any mountain and train riding through India. So I think that's pretty poignant there. And I also agree, like those push pull factors that can cause one person to leave one place and another person to leave another place and settle is always really interesting, and really kind of what this show is about. So it's really I think nice to kind of ponder that and your perspective there. Can you I'm genuinely very curious about this. You played professional hockey in a number of different countries, and can you just give us a little background on that, how that came to be, and where you that took you, the journey that took you on?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is field hockey, by the way. It's not ice hockey, which, especially for an American audience, can be quite of a downer because I think in the US it's officially a women's sport. But in hockey, hockey is huge in Holland, or at least it's pretty big. I think we're one of the, well, arguably it's the best league out there as a country. A lot of foreign players come to Holland to play hockey. I mean, it's an interesting one. I've played hockey since I was like, I think I was 5 years old, and where I'm from, I literally live like a stone throw away from the main Dutch hockey stadium. So my world was a lot of hockey by nature. Like all my friends played it. It was just around the corner, and I think I only realized when I actually started to play in other countries that I realized like, wow, what an incredible breeding ground I was brought up in from a hockey perspective. Like the general level was incredibly high, and I guess like, you know, a fish doesn't know what water is, right? As in,
Yeah.
I had no idea what I actually had around me from a hockey perspective. So for me, it was just normal life. I just did what I did, and apparently I had a little bit of talent. Went through the ranks until eventually I got to the point where I was, yeah, playing professionally for a club called Amsterdam. I played a little bit for the Netherlands itself as well, but that was indoor, which is not even closely as big as outdoor. So yeah, and that, I think, allowed me to go to many places. So I also played New Zealand for a couple of weeks. I played in the UK for multiple years. But actually, funnily enough, it's not something I look back on with a lot of. I enjoyed it as a journey. And I've learned so much about leadership, about pressure, about discipline, about teamwork. I mean, the list is endless and what you'll learn when you're playing at that level. But I guess going back to questioning your reality, I never questioned it. For me, it was my normal life, training 5 times a week, games in the weekend, being gone, being all over the place. Very double feeling. Like, one, it was an amazing journey, but I'm not sure to what extent it was mine, rather than me just playing out a certain talent. Like, and to be honest, I was rather bad at it in terms of the psychological game. Like, I just played out my talents, and that was it. I never it took me until the age of 29 to figure out, wow, people actually train because they want to get better. It's not that just that they do that because the coach is asking them to, which is an interesting parallel when it comes to my work life, which has almost been the opposite, where I realized, wow, I need to take control to actually take things in the direction I want to take them. And funnily enough, I think with hockey, I never fully had that realization, and maybe also not that that drive to become the best, which is necessary to play at that level. But it's given me a lot. It's given me a lot, especially towards the end. The cool trips to other countries. I ended up playing in a Bollywood movie about hockey, which took me to India, the train rides in India, I guess. Eventually, it's on Netflix if you want to watch it.
What's it called?
It's called Kido Kundi. So KHIND, Kido, and then Kundi, same KH Kundi. And so it's given me a lot, and I think I benefit from it a lot more than I give credit for. But yeah, it's been an interesting journey, but I'm also happy it's behind me in that sense.
I think I can relate on multiple levels, actually. Like, so I played sports throughout my younger years until I was 19 years old or something like that, and it was, I would say, like a core part of my identity. Like, and it's what kind of was my center focus. Everything else sort of spun off from that. And I look back on it now, and I think like, wow, that was my identity then, and it doesn't feel at all like it is now. And it's kind of weird to leave that part of you behind, transition into other focuses, and to think back on like, what was it that motivated me to be so dedicated to something, and what are those new motivations today, and what am I dedicated to now? But also to see it as like, definitely that was a positive chapter in my life, that I wouldn't be where I am today without having had that. And I'm grateful for the experiences and the lessons learned on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the identity part is huge. Yes, it becomes you, and people reference to you from that perspective because you're good at something. So why would you quit? Why would you stop? Whereas actually looking back, I think from the age of, well, it must have been like 16, it played in my mind to quit. And yet I kept going till 29. And I think that was because it was part of my identity. So it's funny how we have this weird bias towards keeping our identities intact, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. We don't want to break the shell that we've built so carefully around us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It builds up some strength in you too, like having had those experiences. I mean, kind of circling it back and not trying too hard here to draw some connections that may not be real, but it does make me think like, I get asked a lot about like from people back home, and like, isn't it kind of hard like living away from your family, or moving, like you've lived in a bunch of different countries, and it's not always easy. There's cultural differences, and there's obviously the distance differences, and there's bureaucracy and things like that. And sometimes I just kind of look at it like all part of the journey, and I'm like, yeah, those challenges, but that's kind of what makes it fun. And I can't help but think, maybe I learned some of that through the trials and tribulations of competition, putting yourself out there on a stage where it's easy to be exposed. And I don't know, I wonder if there's some connection there, because for me, and the people that I've talked to on this show, like most people really kind of enjoy the grind a little bit of the challenges that come from moving abroad, experimenting with new places, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think every new country you travel to or work there for whatever reason there's definitely a parallel between that and moving to a different club. There's different kind of different kind of dynamics. There's different types of pressure. You might be operating on a different level because in a job you might be promoted when you move to another country. In a team, it might be that team is better, so you have to perform in a different way. I think there's loads of parallels to be drawn, and the truth is they're not all successful, right? Like sometimes you join a team and it doesn't work out, and sometimes you join a team and it works out perfectly. So I think there's definitely a parallel there. Absolutely.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier, I meant to ask you about this. You said you played hockey in Namibia, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. Please elaborate just a bit on that. I'm so curious about that experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So we were back then we were still allowed to travel, obviously. So we were there with what is now Uprise Academy. We were in Namibia, and I think by that time I'd already officially quit, but I was just walking through the city, and Windhoek is a very small city. So it's the capital of Namibia. And I was walking around there and I suddenly saw a hockey pitch. I was like, oh, that's interesting. They play hockey here, which I guess looking back made sense because they're so close to South Africa, which is a relatively big country. So I Googled around a bit, like, oh, are there any hockey clubs around here? And it turned out there were the Namibian, or what's it called, the Windhoek Wanderers. And I was just curious to see the level because I'd never even thought about hockey being a thing in Namibia. So I reached out to their Facebook page, I think it was, and I just said like, hey guys, do you have a game coming up? I would love to watch. I'm not even with the intention to watch play. And I guess the guy must have Googled my name or something, and he was like, oh wow, you played yourself as well. So I was like, yeah, I used to play a bit. He was like, oh, why didn't you join us? So I was like, oh sure. So I didn't have my hockey sticks, didn't have any of my own gear. I had to like borrow hockey sticks and everything. And and days later I was playing an official match in in the Namibian Premier League, which was quite the experience and fun, and it was a great way to connect with people through sports and a great way to get to know some locals as well. So I really enjoyed it, actually. I mean, I was terrible. It was probably my worst performance ever, but I had fun and it was a good time.
How was the level of competition? Like you'd had a little break. It sounds like you weren't really playing as much anymore, but how did it compare?
Oh, I mean, it would be unfair to compare it. I mean, you're talking about a country with maybe, I don't know, if it would be 300 players, that'd be a lot worse. I think in
Okay.
Holland, we have like over 200,000. So like the level wasn't that high, but we're trying hard. Let's put it that way. And again, to put it in perspective, like I was also terrible. So at the same time, I think we were a good match.
That's great. I have a funny, kind of similar story. I did when I was in university and college, I did a internship in China, and the company that I was working for had a soccer team, a football team, and I thought, and they invited me to come play. Some of the guys did, and I envisioned that it was like 10 guys playing on a field just after work, kicking the ball around, because I had
Yeah.
never played before. Literally, like never. Maybe when I was like 4 years old or something, I played in this thing we call kitty kickers. But I didn't play. But they assumed I was kind of athletic or something, and just said like, "Yeah, I'm sure you play." I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll come out there." And I get out there, and it's like a official match, like our company versus another company with referees, full uniforms, everything. And
Okay.
and then they were trying to get me onto the field, and I was like, no, guys, literally, I don't know how to play. And they thought I was being humble, and they made me play, and I had no clue what I was doing. And within 5 minutes, they pulled me back out. Like, no, okay, you weren't just being humble. You really have no clue what you're doing.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Well, luckily it wasn't like that in Namibia, but I mean, the whole experience is worth it, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's always fun. And you mentioned Uprise Academy, which is where we're going to spend a lot of our time here today, because like, I mean, the first time you and I spoke, if I recall correctly, you contacted me because you were getting ready to take this group of entrepreneurs to, I believe it was Thailand, somewhere in Southeast Asia. And I was so amazed by the story behind the company at Uprise, and you can tell it better than I can. But just reflecting back on it, you're getting ready to take a group of entrepreneurs and visionaries to Southeast Asia to do some exploring, and just, I thought, man, this is so cool what these guys then it was Nomad Academy, now it's Uprise, are
Yeah.
doing. But with my interest in travel and entrepreneurship and startups and stuff, this was just like the perfect fusion. So couple that with what you do as a coach and a mentor, and helping people kind of achieve their dreams, which a lot of the people listening to this show, they kind of have this desire to get to another country or to live a little bit more exciting life, to get out of the mundane. I think these things all sort of like fuse together in the center point that you can kind of talk about a lot more. So if you don't mind, introduce Uprise Academy to the audience, and a little bit more about what you do and what the company does.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you mentioned correctly, like we've been through some transitions, but by now we are Uprise Academy. We want to help people feel alive. We think there's too many people sitting in jobs they don't like, and they've studied their asses off to get to where they want to get to, and before they know it, they're on some sort of skyscraper on the 24th floor, looking out the window, thinking, "Really, this is it?" This is why I've been working so hard. And but where do you go from there, right? And that's where really our mission came from. Like, how can we help people to feel alive again, connect to people, and also connect to what they want to be doing? And I guess that's how the idea of our original concept was born. Let's take 30 people, let's travel the world, open their eyes again. Let's get excited about things, whilst we teach them the what we called always said we said the skills and mindset for an entrepreneurial career. And what that really means is that we taught people online and face to face whilst traveling through 3 countries at a time. So we did this in Africa, we did this in South America, we did this in Asia, and it was incredible. It's so cool. All in, that's definitely true. So 3 months is a long time, which means that there's all the ups and downs, but that's the point of feeling alive, right? It's not just all high fives and Instagram. It's the realness of it. And I think it rarely happened that people went back to their old life after they went on a trip with us. I think an interesting thing to mention as well is, like, when we talk about entrepreneurial careers, we don't necessarily mean that everyone needs to become the next Mark Zuckerberg. Like, the truth is, who cares? Like, he's just another guy, and I'm not sure he's that much happier than the average person next door. What we mean by an entrepreneurial career is really like working on things that have meaning to you, developing a personal mission and starting to work towards that with a sense of ownership that can be used to go to another country. It can be used to start a side hustle, and maybe you do want to start a full-time company, but let's create an environment where at least you can explore that. And that's always been at the heart of what we do. Right now we can't travel, obviously, so we started a new initiative, the Collective, which is really a community where we try to do the same but in smaller, what we call sprints, so over 4 weeks online. And we just kicked that off. It's going very well, so we're very happy with that. But the heart of it has always been the same. Let's help people move into careers that make them feel alive.
And how does that play out tangibly? Like, can you go into a bit more detail on, like, let's say we can travel again, we're talking real life, hopefully again in the near future. Like, what does the workshop environment look like, and leveling up skills and such like that?
Yeah. So, and that goes also to what my role is. So I'm basically the head of product, although with the startup, you're basically everything and nothing, right, at the same time. And you probably all know the drill. So I think my title has changed about 8 times. My main job is to focus on the find your why part. So developing your personal mission, maybe a vision board, and really figuring out and questioning yourself, like, what is it I want to be doing? What do I want to spend my time on? What am I good at? In what context do I want to work? Also on these trips, that's what we'll spend the first, let's say, 2 to 3 weeks on. What is it you actually want? Which is a very reflective process, and it takes time and it's hard. And after you've done that, and we deliver this face to face in workshops, maybe we have some speakers, some panel events or whatever we organize locally. And at the same time, it's an online experience. So it's like a hybrid version where you also have daily content that you can work towards. And as soon as you've done that, you move into the more entrepreneurial part, which is basically called zero to launch. So we really try to make sure that everyone who goes through any of our programs ends up with at least a tangible outcome, launching something. And it doesn't really matter what that is. That's up to you. And it could be this, like I just said, like maybe it's just a blog, or maybe it's a full-blown company. We've seen both. But really, it's helping people through that phase from, I don't know what I'm doing, to, okay, let's at least make a start with something. Because I think that's where we are a little bit different. It's super focused on action taking. All the information is out there. We all got Google. That's not the problem. The problem is, how do you take action? We very much focus on taking action towards that. And we have, again, an online program with live workshops where we take people step by step through taking action, and we actually hold them accountable so that they actually move forward with the program itself. And my role within that is mainly the find your why part, but also ongoing coaching and mentoring. And a big part of my role as well is the community building. Because I mean, this always hurts, but at the same time, I love it. When you go on these trips, you put all your effort in creating the best possible content, and by the end, all they talk about is the friends they made and the connections they made. And I mean this is funny. Like, when you ask people about travel experience as well, like, what was your favorite place? Almost always they'll talk about the places where they met nice people. And I think that's a realization. Like, we're an education company, and yet all we focus on, or what we predominantly focus on, is building connections between people, because that's what makes you stick through the learning process. It's the connections and the brainstorms and the discussions, and content to that extent is secondary. So we really try to combine those two things: community building and education.
Super cool. It makes a lot of sense with the rebrand too, from Nomad Academy to Uprise. Like that resonates with the why part.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, yeah, having Nomad in your name when there's no traveling isn't the best thing in the world. I have to be honest there. Yeah.
Point number two. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
1A and 1B.
Yes, exactly.
Appreciate the honesty. That's great. How much of the trips are like pure travel versus like, how much time are you putting in on this why and the self reflection and the zero to launch versus just enjoying being in some foreign corner of the world?
Yeah, no, it's a fair point. And I think when people see us initially, they think we're a travel program, but actually we're not a travel program. The reality is that on our programs, out of 30 people, we'll get about, let's say, 15 to 16 different nationalities. In other words, people will need to fly anyway. We might as well go somewhere nice. And the travel serves more the purpose of getting people out of their home environment more than taking them to a nice beach. Sure, it helps and it's nice and it's attractive, but we stay in the same place for 1 month, right? So yes, there's travel, but the downside of travel, in our case, is that it can be very distracting. We don't try to make it too much of an inherent thing of our program. Because in the end, we don't want this trip to just be a cool trip you once went on. Like the idea is that it has to be life changing. That's why we're doing this in the first place. So the travel plays a role, but we don't go all into it too much because, well, like I said, like it can be a distraction. So we only travel like basically to 3 countries in 3 months, and in those countries we stay in the same place. So it's more about exploring a local place than it is to see a whole country.
Nice. What's the what are I know for instance, Southeast Asia, what was the travel itinerary like?
Southeast Asia, the one I went on as a program director, was Chiang Mai in Thailand, Bali in Canggu, and then we went to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And we had another one planned, but that one got cancelled, which started in Laos, in Luang Prabang, and was going to go to Cambodia and then Thailand. So a little bit of a smaller circle, but more interesting countries, arguably.
I really love it. Really resonates with me that you don't have such a focus on travel, because like I've talked about this before on with other guests on the show, and also just in conversations with friends and stuff. Like I actually don't know that I do like to travel. I enjoy visiting other countries and everything, but it's not the like travel bit of it. I really like getting deep into the culture of a place, and then like that's the real fun part. You mentioned earlier like the community aspect and getting a feel for the local life, and you guys stay in one place for a month. And so differentiating from other programs that say, hey, we're going to take a group of 30 people on a whirlwind tour of Europe together and have a great time the whole time, disconnecting from that and giving sort of the opposite experience sounds so much richer to me.
Yeah, I think it's richer, and I also think it fits with our target audience. Like I think travel as an 18-year-old or as a 21-year-old, it serves a purpose, and maybe that's what you need to be doing. And I did it myself as well, and I loved it. But looking back, I've seen a lot of places, but did I connect to any, or did I connect to a lot of people? I'm not too sure. So I think for our crowd, which is more like 30 years old, like the backpacking type travel vibe, it's just not it anymore, right? But at the same time, they do want to leave. So that's where this came from, right? Like, how do you take people outside of their normal environment and get them to see the world, but still it being a productive time, like
Mm-hmm.
without it just being a break? Because from just sitting on a beach, no one has ever changed their career through that. Like at a certain point, you have to start doing something. If you don't do anything, you'll just go back to what it was. Because the truth is, you take yourself on that trip. So if you
Yeah.
don't actively work on you, nothing is going to go any different when you come back home.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. What is the sort of like, I'm sure you get a wide variety of people, but what is this, if you had to kind of paint the demographic of a prototypical upriser,
Yeah.
what would that look like?
A typical upriser would be around, let's say, 29 to 30. They're probably from a Western country, between quotes. So like US, Europe, some Aussies, New Zealand, South Africans sometimes, and the occasional like Colombian and things like that. About 29 years old, went through a good university, ended up in a corporate, where they had a good salary, a good job, and they, to a certain extent, enjoyed their life, but slowly but surely started to feel a bit burned out almost, right? That feeling of, wow, this is it. And whenever I say that, yeah, exactly like this, people always laugh because it resonates.
It
Um,
totally resonates. I mean,
right?
it's
And
insane.
that's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. And so there are very skilled people, but what they're lacking is a sense of direction that was decided by them. And I think that that's what bonds them. And so sometimes you get more people that have already gone down the freelance journey and want to accelerate that. Others are like, I've got a couple of notes on my iPhone about what my potential startup might be, and that's it. But what they have in common is all they have got the skills, but now they need the direction and the push.
Mm. And sort of the framework and the maybe to be held accountable.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the rudderless boat metaphor. Like they've got this big, beautiful
Yeah.
boat that's it's just perfectly ready for travel, but it needs a little bit of direction and a little bit of guidance. And that's
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
say that can relate. I can relate to that. Just, I mean, I'm not sure if I've shared this with you before or if on in another episode if I've shared this, but like I left like one of those. I mean, I had that exact same experience. Like went through university, studied a particular degree, went into that industry directly, worked in it, and actually like really enjoyed it and loved the company and the people around me. Was making good money and like going on the same path that I thought I would want to go on, but wasn't like completely fulfilled. And a lot of the reason I was not fulfilled was because I really craved a bit more of like an international experience. Like I had gotten some of that previously in my life, and just traveling a couple weeks a year wasn't doing it for me.
Yeah.
And I just wasn't sure how to, at that time, especially like this wasn't all that long ago, but it feels like a long time ago, 6 years ago, something like that. I thought like, I need to find some way I can just work from anywhere. But I had zero idea how to do that. It's much more much more possible today than it was, especially because of
Yeah.
COVID. But I wasn't sure not only like where to find that job or what to do or something like that. I also was like, how are my skills going to
Mm.
translate to that world? So I was really lost with this. Basically took a year to really try to figure that out, and actually like could even say I'm still figuring that out. Like it's a journey, but I think something like Uprise can be so instrumental in helping people give people that guidance. Like I would have absolutely loved that exact opportunity when I was going through that struggle 5 6 years ago.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think what you just said there is spot on. Like it's a journey and it's ongoing, right? And people always ask me when I talk about developing a personal mission, your why, how, what, your sense of direction, right? Yeah, but doesn't it change all the time? And yes, it does. Of course, it can. Like the strong why won't, but the how and your what you're going to do that might change. But the point is now it's yours, right? And I think what I love about what you just said as well is that you actually took your time. Like and I have this a lot of time as well when I do some coaching. It's like there's such a vibe of I want to have it all and I want to have it right now. Whereas, my God, these things take time. And I speak to 25, 26-year-olds and they're like, I don't have this and that and this and that in their career. And I'm like, no, you just started, and it takes time and it takes patience. And all you need to do at that stage, I think, is more focus on how do I make it mine? Because as soon as you start doing that, I think it becomes super obvious what you don't want to be doing. I think that's also why I'm hearing your story, right? Like you moved, okay, this is what I don't want. I need to be abroad. And that was the first focus. And then you can figure out how you can use your skills and find another job maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And be willing to take a step backwards, take
Yeah,
one or two steps backwards to take two or three steps forwards. And I think
absolutely.
that's, as you just mentioned, I think a lot of people are unwilling to make that bargain. And
Yeah.
if they do, I don't know about your experience. I would love to hear if you disagree. But most of the time when I see people take those couple steps backwards, they end up happy with the end result.
Always. Like, to be honest, I've rarely come across anyone that went through a solid reflection and came out of it at the end saying, "Oh my God, I should never have done that." Like it's it's absolutely worth it. And the interesting thing as well is that I think when you go through a period of solid reflection on what it is you actually want, you start to define things like success and your key metrics for yourself. Because I think as well what you just said, right? You started talking about the job you had and immediately finances come in. And I'm sure of course that's important. Of
Yeah.
course it is. But and you need to survive, you need to pay the bills. But I've rarely come across people that went through a career change that was more aligned with their values and purpose, and they earned less and they regretted it. Sure, they would like to maybe earn more, but that's a balance that immediately, as meaning and purpose go up, the consequence financially is taken so much easier.
Yeah.
And I was fascinated by that. And it's hard to imagine when you have a good salary, but as soon as it's your reality, you're like, yeah, why did I ever question this?
That's such a good point. And it's really actually very, very amazing how quickly you adapt, right? Like
Yeah.
I don't mind. I'm very public when I talk at conferences or give little just group discussions or whatever about this same sort of thing. I don't mind saying like I took a 50% pay cut to change my life radically, and I would never go back on that. I tweaked
Exactly.
some things in my finances. I made some sacrifices here and there, but I barely noticed it in terms of the money, which is crazy to think about cutting out half your salary. And if I wasn't happy now, I would do it again. Like no problem whatsoever.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm with you on that. And of course, this is coming from a luxury position. And I try to be as aware of that as I can. But for those who can make that decision, the reality is that like when I help people go through a career transition, one of the first things I ask them is what is the minimum you need to live on? And then very often it's only 20 to 30 or 40% of what they earn right now. That means there's a lot of room to play around and look for new jobs with lower salaries, and suddenly that opens a lot of opportunities. And it means that sure, you might not get in at like a mid-level, but at least you're getting in at a junior level at something that you actually care about. And I think it's always an interesting question to ask people because it makes them more aware of what it is they actually need versus what they want or what they perceive as success.
Do you find that often when you ask that question at first, the first response is much greater than what they ultimately arrive at, or are people pretty pragmatic about getting down to that 20 or 30% pretty quickly?
Um, well, yeah, you always have to explain it twice. That's definitely
Yeah,
true.
that's
Like,
it. Yeah.
yeah, because it's like because very often, like when you're in a corporate, like I mean, it's designed very well. Like it knows how to keep you in. It knows
Mhm.
how to keep the carrot right in front of you, right? And so it becomes your reality in that sense, and it becomes your aim. So even the thought of going down is like it would make you probably physically feel sick. So it's something that is like it goes back to knowing what is actually important to you. And if that is what you find important, go do that. But make sure you've questioned it at least. As soon as you help people make that little bit of a mindset shift, like, hey, wow, what if I would set my own metrics as opposed to go by the metrics that my boss is putting on me? What would I then strive towards? Would it still be that financial gain, or would it be maybe building something of my own? And because I promise you, you'll be more happy with the first £10 you make from your first side hustle than you'll be with a 10% salary increase, probably. And yeah, it's little things like that that I think are interesting.
Yeah, yeah, it is very, very interesting. At Uprise, do you find that a lot of the people that are going through the program, are they working towards sort of tech startup mentality, or do you have other sort of demographics that are not necessarily in that field? And I'll tell you why I asked that question. One of the things I'm coming across in these circles of people, particularly like in our age group, and people also who are contacting me about, hey, I would love to be living in Europe right now, or I would love to go live in South America for a year, but I don't know how to do it. But my job, I don't have the tech skills to do that, or I don't have any desire to work in tech. This is like a common question I hear. And so I'm really excited to introduce people to the idea that you don't have to go into tech. You don't have to be a developer or like you said, a Mark Zuckerberg to live this lifestyle if it's what you desire. So I'm curious with my question about Uprise, like, do people go down different paths?
Yes, absolutely. Like we don't get that many, like I guess there's almost two answers to your question. Like the first one is we don't get that many developers in the first place. And the truth is I think that's because from my experience, developers are pretty hands-on people themselves. They'll just start building, so they don't really need us. They'll just mess about and they have their communities and they have their environment. So we don't get that many developers. We do get people that have an interest in developing an app, but very often that idea of I need an app is an easy solution to a problem they've experienced, but not necessarily the best solution. So it's the obvious, like these days, like you just said, like building an app is like the obvious solution. to any problem. Whereas there's probably a lot of other solutions. And at that very, very, very early stage, you probably don't even want to build an app. So there's very rarely anyone coming out of our program with a fully built app, because the truth is, our programs are 3 months. There's only so much you can do in 3 months, right? So you first need to go through finding your customers, your problem solution fit, your MVP, et cetera, et cetera. I think building an app is the last thing you should do, and definitely not one of the first ones, because who knows what it is people actually need. And also building an app is incredibly expensive, or technology for that matter. I find it incredibly expensive. It's super hard work, and it's very rare that it immediately hits the mark. I mean, yeah, you work for a tech company, you know how hard it is, right?
Yeah, I mean, I tell people often, like, we have a to-do list, and
Yeah.
it takes 85 people in 40 different countries and millions of dollars to create this cool to-do list. So like, when people say, "Oh, I have a great idea for an app, we could just create this," you just make it and set it and you make millions of dollars. This is not how it works. And there are other jobs out there besides building apps.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, and that's what I guess I mean, like when you dive deeper into the problem they think they're solving, an app is probably not even the best solution. And there's a million ways you can either hack your way around it, or all you needed was Slack or something like that, right? Or or another to-do type app. So not too many tech people from that perspective.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's encouraging for people. Like, I mean, I really can say I'm having a lot of these conversations with people who are just like, I just don't know how to translate my skill set, which is in handshaking and baby kissing. Like I'm much more of an in-person kind of, I don't have tech skills. I don't know the latest and greatest tools. And I think it's really encouraging for people. I had somebody on the show who like became a flight attendant and just travels all over the world, gets to live wherever she wants. And, she became a corporate or private flight attendant, like that's, there are these other types of skills. And she had to go through a process like what you have at Uprise in a way, just to kind of find out like, what's your why, what is it that I really want to do? What makes me happy, and where can I align my skills with those desires?
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think at the same time, like the entrepreneurial pathway is a very specific path. Like very often we also have people that figure out during our programs that entrepreneurialism is not for them, and still we have them go through that process, because I think there's, especially when you want to apply yourself to a startup and you want to work for a startup, there's nothing stronger than an aligned mission, because startups don't have money, they don't have the budgets yet. All they have is their drive and their passion and their sense of meaning in what they're doing. And if you can align with that, the skills is a secondary problem, and you can probably figure that out along the way. Like if you manage to, do your job in some big corporate, you're probably also fine in the early stages of a startup, as long as you're willing to go through the grind. So, or maybe not even a startup, or just something else that aligns with what you want to do. Like if your mission is strong enough, getting into a small team is I think a lot easier, and arguably more important than having the skills specifically.
Yeah, exactly. Like skills can be learned. Like, I mean, there's enough resources out there, free and paid these days, that you can acquire pretty much any skill that you want at a pretty efficient rate. And I think it's also important, something you touched on, like not to discount the skills that you have acquired, the experiences that you have acquired in your, let's say, corporate job or in whatever line of work you've been in. Like you have acquired some experience and skills that can translate to something else. And if you're willing to perhaps take a step back, to take 2 steps forward and think about your why, the sky's the limit, really. You're not pigeonholed for life.
Absolutely not. No. And I think, like I just said earlier, like we all have Google. Like when someone says to me, like, I don't have those skills, the question isn't, it's one simple question, which is, well, how can you get them? Right. And as long as you're willing to learn and move away from this sort of expert mindset, which I think is actually killing a lot of people trying to go towards something. It's like this idea that you either have to be an expert at something, or you're not even allowed to touch it. Whereas no one was born an expert, right? And I think it's super important to remember that when you're thinking about a career transition. It's like exactly what you just said. The question isn't like, do you have this or not? The question is, how can you learn and where can you get that? So if people even to you say something like, yeah, I don't have all these skills or knowledge, well, where can you find it? How can you figure it out? That is the startup world.
That is it in a nutshell. Exactly. And you also have to remember that like you're not by making a pivot or a change. I don't know. I'd be interested to get your perspective on this, having coached a lot of people and seen people make these shifts. But like I tend to think that a lot of us, we tend to think that, okay, if I leave, I've been on this path, I've been working my way up, I'm now an assistant vice president at such and such company. And if I step out of this box, now I've lost everything I worked for. And I totally disagree with that mindset, though I understand it, but you're not abandoning that, and everything you've put in is not wasted. It is all very valuable and should not be discounted.
Absolutely. No, I fully agree with that. Like for me, every experience and every investment is worth it, whether it has the outcome you want it to have or not. And also, I think when it comes to career transition, very often people look at it very, very, very binary. Like, I have to make this decision for life or don't do it at all. Whereas actually the truth is, if you have all those skills and you've built those up for like 5 or 10 years and you go do something else for 1 year, there's a realistic chance that you can go back what you were doing before. Like it's not that all or nothing vibe. It's perceived as that. It feels like that because it feels like you're saying goodbye to something. And maybe that's what it takes to make that change. But that doesn't mean it is all lost. And you can probably move back if for whatever reason you need to.
Yeah. I mean, it's not completely related, but it's we started out talking about your hockey career, and like
Yeah.
some of the things that we learned along the way through sports as an 18-year-old can still be applied in your work today, whether you're conscious of it or not. Like that those skills are, and the lessons you learn there are valuable. They have use today even.
Yeah, absolutely. And this goes back to also what you were saying, like about the time to reflect upon it, because there's so many skills that have such great transferability if you are aware of how they can be applied in other areas. And the same goes with needs. Like when you look at what are the actual needs you have that need to be ticked, like which are the non-negotiables and which are the needs that you're okay with if they're not in a job. Like don't look at things in terms of jobs, but look at your own needs and where can I get those boxes ticked in that sense.
That's a really cool starting point. That'll make you go real introspective quickly thinking about that. I love that framework.
Yeah, I think it works. Like once you flip it and start to look like how can a job fit into my personal mission as opposed to how can I just align to someone else's personal mission, suddenly you're in control.
Yeah.
And it's quite an important mindset flip.
Super interesting. Yeah, I think it sounds like we could go for hours just on this kind of stuff, and I would love to. In the interest of your time, I won't keep going down that trail. I want to circle back real quick to your life as an expat in London and your transition to having moved from the Netherlands to London, sort of permanently now it seems, or at least semi permanently. Was that experience challenging in any way? I mean, did you? Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure from a visa standpoint and all of that. I mean, you could just move there, but when you reflect back on that, how was that experience moving to a new country?
Yeah, I think looking back, I was relatively naive about it, and I think that in a way saved me a bit. I mean, I had two things, positive things, which was like I had a girlfriend in the UK as well, so I had somewhere to live, someone to live with, and I had a hockey team. So from a social perspective, that was covered, which was definitely a blessing. Like I didn't realize it that much at that time, but like having a local club you can just join definitely helps a lot. I think my biggest challenge was definitely on the work front because I just finished my psychology degree. I knew I didn't want to become a therapist, but I didn't know what I do want to do. So yeah, it was very challenging to figure that one out. And my whole goal was just I'm going to be going through so many experiences as deliberately as possible and as focused as possible. And I'm really going to try to put myself out there and be a little bit vulnerable. So I think in my first year, I had like 5 different kind of jobs. I was like a sales guy. I was a bike tour guide through London. I
Nice.
had all kinds of jobs in my in my first year until eventually that was for me the same year that you had, where at the same time you're trying to figure out like what is it I actually enjoy. And I don't regret doing that at all. It was definitely challenging in that sense, but I just, you know, was super open to any form of job, not just because I needed the money, but also I was like, well, if I don't know what I want to be doing, who am I to say no to an opportunity? If I don't have an alternative in terms of what I do want to do, I might as well say yes. So and that really helped me actually, because very quickly you then start to figure out, what do I enjoy and what don't I enjoy, and what you actually want to be doing becomes a little bit more apparent very quickly when you're doing things you don't want to be doing.
Oh, that's such a good point about saying yes to things when you don't have opportunities. Like, just say yes and see, at least if nothing else, you'll cross something off your list. Like, okay, I know I don't like sales. Great, got it.
Yeah,
Done.
exactly.
And maybe you discover you do, but you don't even have to go into it with that mindset. Just try stuff and figure it out.
Yeah, and
I
along the
also
way
don't.
you'll make friends and connections, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know where those lead. I also don't regret we don't have the gap year mentality in the US. It just like isn't a thing. But sort of taking this gap year in between, and you mentioned this before too, and like I want to be cognizant of this as well. Like it comes from a place of privilege to be able to do something like that. But I was fortunate enough to kind of just say, I'm going to take a year and kind of figure this out and try some different things. And one of those things I thought I kind of wanted to do is get into like e-commerce and store. My wife, I'd started an Etsy shop that was doing very well. And we kind of said, okay, I'm going to help you with that. I'm going to learn about e-commerce while we're doing this year of traveling and working online and stuff. And I'm going to, maybe dive into Amazon shops or something like this. And I realized like, I actually really don't like this. Like, it's just not for me at all. It has zero to do with my personality. I don't get to interact with any real people and just not for me. So by saying yes to that, I not only ruled out a few things and didn't go down those paths, but I ended up finding the current path that I'm on. So I think it can be a real positive to take that, to give ourselves that time to figure those things out.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm fully with you on that. And like, one of the things, like also with Uprise, but like also for myself, like one of the things I really love doing is just running little experiments. Like, you can read about it a million times, but unless you do it, you won't know. So figure out these little, I think, was it Tim Ferriss calls it reversible experiments? No, but
I was wondering if
concept,
you were going to
right?
reference Tim.
Yeah. Well, no, but he does this as well. It was funny because not that I came up with the concept of an experiment, but it's something that I noticed I was doing, and then I heard it in a podcast, and I was like, oh, interesting. Yeah, he actually gave it a name, and he actively works with this. But like, just run the experiment, because in 5 minutes, or at least in a month, you'll know if this is something for you or if it's not. Yeah. So with you on that, absolutely.
Yeah, I love this mindset. The experimental mindset is a good thing to go into this sort of life transition standpoint from, I think, in my opinion, and sounds like yours. So before we wrap up too much, just a little bit more on the life in London. So you made the transition there, and you've talked a little bit about the energy and what kind of kept you. It sounds like. How would you describe life in London? Let's say, you're talking to somebody here who's listening to the show that's also considering a move to London. I don't know if advice is the right word, but just, what would you say to them if they're like, hey, Steven, what's life like in London?
Yeah, what's life like in London? I think, first of all, it's very fast paced. Okay, probably people in New York would laugh at this, but the rest of the world is very fast paced. And that is something you need to be willing to go through. And before you know it, you know that your own walking pace is twice as fast. And that's just something that happens. So my advice would be, if you're thinking about moving to another country in general, do it. Like, absolutely do it. And because the challenge, that is where it is. Are you scared? Is it difficult? Yes, probably yes. And that's why you should do it in the first place, I think, personally. But why London? I think London is specifically interesting for people who are interested in the startup world. And with startups, again, I don't just mean the technology world, but I love this place from a let's try things out perspective. Like, if you are into, I don't know, purple Playmobil, there's probably an entire subculture, right? that is focused on that and how to build them. And I think that type of energy is so cool. I think something unique in London, which is, it's also its own problem, I think, but it also makes it unique, is that everyone arrives here alone. I think over 60% of this city is expats, or at least people that weren't born here, which means everyone arrives alone, which is by nature, everyone's a little bit lonely. So there's a super high interest in connecting. and people connect over whatever topic makes them connect, right? That's something I really like in London specifically, is that, but might be the case in other cities, I don't know. I haven't lived in them for that long to really give an opinion on that. But what I've noticed here is that for every little thing you might be interested in, there's an entire community around it. That's something I love. And also at the same time, I think it's vital to survive here, because by nature it's hard work and you arrived alone. So at the same time, that gives you that opportunity to connect to people and have that sense of social health that you will need to thrive here, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a very vibrant city. And like you said, maybe like people from New York might say like that's fast paced, but it is a fast paced city for sure for anybody coming from elsewhere. And but just so much to see and do, and the history and the international community. It's a very fun place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and the international vibe of it. And I also think like it actually thinking about it more now, it really forces you to build your own identity, because there is no such thing as mainstream in London when you're not actually English, because everyone arrives from such a different background that there's no such thing as mainstream, or at least that's how I experience it, which I absolutely love, because it forces you to think about, what am I going to wear, what am I going to be doing, where am I going to eat, because nothing is mainstream in that sense, besides obviously the Pretz and all the other chain shops.
Yeah, in general, I think that's something I found, like moving outside of your own comfort zone, whether it be like even in the US, you could move from a region to another region and kind of like find yourself questioning, like, everybody else dresses a little different or talks a little different or uses slang a different way. And certainly moving from the US to Europe, there's things like that. And you say, why do I do it that way? Like, or I'm going to continue doing it. That's part of me. Yeah. These little questions are part of the journey that are really fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
This has been super fun for me, Steven. I really appreciate it. I don't know if you have anything else you want to share with the audience, whether it be about London, travel, coaching, startups. You do a little bit of everything that's all kind of connected to this show. So if you have anything else, please feel free to share it. But if not, this has just been a real lot of fun for me, and I appreciate your time.
Yeah, no, I think that's it. I just hope that people can see the year of 2021 as a year of experimentation and taking action towards what they want. Small goals, not too big, and move forward, because I think times in itself are difficult enough. So keep it small, but keep taking action.
Stay focused on the why, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm gonna personally think about this a bit more too. If people want to follow you, I'll share all of this in the show notes as well, but and a link to Uprise Academy as well. But if people want to follow you, your work, anything you're doing, where's the best place for them to connect with you?
Yeah, the best place would definitely be LinkedIn. That's just my name, Steven Ebbers. Yeah, send me a request. Perfect. And I'll definitely reply. We can talk from there.
Excellent. All right, great. Thank you again, Steven. It's been a real joy, and we will speak again soon.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in today from wherever you are in the world. Once again, I'm Chase, and this has been another episode of About Abroad. You can visit aboutabroad.com to get our latest updates and listen to past episodes, or find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, really anywhere you get your podcasts. On that note, if you enjoyed the show, feel free to subscribe, and if inclined, leave a few stars and a review. It's truly, truly appreciated and will help more wanderers just like you find us. Until the next time, adios from España.